Okay, so now you have your basic design for your color wheel, or at least I do. So now we're going to talk about painting and in regards to the supplies that come with painting. So in your kit, you should have 4 paintbrushes. These are yours for the, I mean, I would like them back. If you can get them back to me, that'd be excellent. But I did try and buy a set for almost each and every one of you. So there's that. And powdered tempera paint in each of the baggies. And a scoop for each color so that you don't cross-contaminate your paint as you're making. So I'm actually going to start with yellow because I just am. I think it's one of the, well, it's not that I just am. I'm starting with yellow because when you add black to yellow, it turns green, and this usually kind of freaks students out. So I just want to warn you. You have to be a little bit subtler with the yellow than a lot of your other colors. So we're going to go ahead. We're going to first start by making our yellow. And you want to mix your powdered tempera in a 1-to-1 ratio. So that means 1, the exact amount of water to powdered paint. I was afraid to send liquids home, so that is why you're getting powdered tempera. Normal. I've never actually even really touched this stuff, and I was really against the idea at first of doing it only. I just thought it would be the safest way to send a supply home. But then as I was getting your kits together, I was like, oh, well, it's going to kind of be like, this is sort of how the Renaissance painters did this. So in a way, it's kind of fun. To kind of historically think about it on that level. So now I'm also going to put my water, and I would go less is more with the water. You can always add more. But, and then you're going to want to mix your powder and your water together. And I'm probably going to, I can already tell you right now, I'm going to need more liquid. I need more water for this amount of powder. But I'm going to use my little spoon. And if you have a like 1/4 teaspoon measuring device at home in your kitchen, you can use that. You just have to wash it and dry it in between each use. So you need to dry it with a paper towel. Oh, sorry. I don't know if y'all got to see that. And I'm going to get out as many of these little lumps as I can. And yes, that means you just need to sit here and dig at those lumps to get it decently mixed together. Okay. So all paint is made out of 2 things, pigment and a binder. In this case, your binder is egg. And in I think for this it's probably egg yolk. Pardon me, egg white. But in some more ancient recipes for tempera paint, which is what this is going to come out more matte. And it dries much quicker. You have to kind of use it like paint by number. It's not going to blend together in the same way that an acrylic would. So a binder for acrylic paint is plastic. So it's like a liquid plastic. Again, this is egg and pigment. House paints are a version of acrylic most of the time, unless they're oil. Oil, it's linseed oil is your binder, plus the raw pigment. And there are artists today who mix their own paints, just like our the Renaissance artists did. So I'm going to start out with yellow. So you want your pure color hue in your middle ring. I can already tell you this is a little watery. So I'm going to do at least 2 coats because this is almost like watercolor. And you might want to use one of your finer brushes. I think I'm using a number 4. The sizes on your brushes are in response to how big the round is on your brush. I'm going to let that dry, and I'm going to do another coat because it's way more translucent than it's really supposed to be. With watercolor, you would want it a little more translucent, but so one thing that I have 2 things of water here, one to get clean water and one to clean off my brush, which is also kind of, I'm stealing that technique from watercolor, but since you're mixing water to your paint, that's what this is all about. That's why I have a clean one. When I am painting at home, I actually like to use plastic lids from yogurt containers, whatever kind of food containers that you have, that you'd normally just dispose of or throw away. I like to use them to mix my paint. You're also probably going to want to, now this brush has tons of water in it. Notice when I clean my brush, I sweep it on the bottom. I don't jab it. If you jab it, you are going to make it a sloppy brush and give it a bad hair day. You have to softly sweep it on the bottom to kind of clean it as well as you can and get the yellow actually out of it. And then I usually try and get a lot of the excess off by dragging it on the side of the water container. And then you're going to get rid of that excess water with a paper towel, which I have to go and grab. So now I have my paper towel. I'm going to dry it off. Now I'm ready to go. I'm going to get some of my yellow onto my palette. And now you get to mix. We're going to start, one of these is going to be a shade and one of these is going to be a tint. You get to pick which one you want to be the shade and which one you want to be the tint. I think I'm going to do the tint here and the shade here. So a tint is white plus your color. So we have the color there, it's yellow. So now I'm going to make my white. So I have my cup, a new fresh cup. And I've been in the bag, I kind of like dust it off and then I try and pack it and like get rid of the excess. Because you're going to need to make more as you go along. So you don't want to overdo it on your powder. Because you're going to be adding white to all of your colors, not just this one section. So I'm going to try it with that, and I got to put yellow on my brush, so I got to clean it again. Sweeping at the bottom, getting rid of the extra water. Going to dry it off on the paper towel. Now I go in again, and I can tell you, look at that. Well, that actually looks pretty good. That is a little bit more the consistency you want. It's not quite as watery, so that's good. But you need more white. When you make a tint with a color, you're usually going to need more white than you kind of think you do to really make a difference. Like even yellow, which is a pretty light color, needs a lot more white in there to really make a difference in value. Okay. So, and then you want to get it right. Don't be afraid to touch paint to paint. Well, and I say these things and then I see it and I'm like, this is really still very transparent. But that might be just a quality of this particular kind of temper paint. In art supplies, I don't like to say this, but it's true. Brands do matter. Brands and types of things do matter. And like I said earlier, it's not ideal, but I didn't know how else to send anything home, and I have a budget, to share supplies with you guys. You don't, if this is not your thing, I don't want your family, especially right now with things economically the way they are, I don't want to expect your families to purchase you something that you might not even really enjoy all that much. So, but there's enough of my color. I can come back to it in a minute, and I'm going to go ahead and do a double layer on my yellow, which since I'm not mixing it with anything, I can go directly into my little portion cup here to do that. And if you do have paints at home, you most certainly may use them. And you might get out of the lines a little bit. That's okay, because your intermediates on each side, when you touch paint to paint, will help kind of get rid of that. All right, so now we have our tint. We're going to make our shade. And I'm putting my shades in that outer layer. You get to kind of pick where you want the shades to go. So I'm putting a little bit more paint on my palette that I'll mix black into. And I'm going to go ahead and wash my brush, because we don't want that yellow mixing with that black that we're going to mix up in a minute. And I just go ahead and dry it, because it's habit. It's a good habit to get into. And got my black. And black is interesting because in terms of paint, I mean, in terms of anything, it's so strong. I'm going to be careful. I also don't recommend, this can stain. These paints and powders, they can stain your clothes. So just be careful. I wouldn't let little brothers and sisters get anywhere near them. What else about? Oh, wear clothes that don't matter as much to you. Please, please, please. So now I am mixing it up. Oh, look at that. But yes, black is super strong in terms of creating a graphic quality. And, like, look at how easily that just made my dirty water, where I clean my brush, just transform. But I'm going to go ahead and use a much skinnier brush for a couple reasons. This is my more detailed part of my design. And you really only need, and your brushes are going to be a little bit stiff because they're brand new. You only need a tiny little bit. I probably just got too much. I'm going to get rid of it. It's like the smallest amount, because it's so strong. And with yellow, like I said before, when you mix the black into the yellow to create a tint, it's going to turn it green. And I think I might even go for a little bit darker. It's just going to turn into darker green, because this is the thing. Black is the absence of color, but when you see black in a design and anything, it's actually just really dark blue. So there is technically no such thing as black, but that's why it turns green. Because when you mix blue and green, or blue and yellow, you get green. Et voila. Parts of me thinks that this might not have quite enough water to it. So I'm going to add more water, and I might regret that. We will see. Okay. And when you're painting, you're sweeping with your brush. You're not coloring with your brush. You are sweeping. I'm going to be honest with you. I don't know how I feel about this consistency here. And I think that also I just went way out of the lines of my carefully drawn out design. Yeah, this is going to take a couple more. I'm going to have to remake this color and create another layer, because this is something funky is going on. All right. So I'm going to get more yellow. And after I did the second layer on the pure yellow, it looks a lot better. And you're definitely going to see, if you had any pencil lines, you're going to see them with the yellow especially. Okay, we're going to try this again. Because yeah. All right, that looks better. The second layer. I'm still gonna, I do think I need to wait for it to finish drying a little bit more. Oh my. Okay, but yeah, it's there. Gonna let it dry. Hopefully the second layer will make that a little bit more opaque and not quite so wispy and funky. At this point, I don't think I need to clean up my paint water just yet, but you guys, at some point you're going to need to. Okay, so, and since you're at home, hopefully that's gonna be a lot easier for you to do. So I went ahead and did my yellow. I am gonna come back and redo this guy, but now I'm gonna go ahead and try, let's go for red. Everybody loves red, so we're gonna go for red. Maybe. That might, I'm not gonna lie, I think that was a little bit much on the powder, but you know, these portion cups won't keep your paint good for that long. They do for acrylic, but not for tempera. It's gonna dry out a little bit quicker. I'm gonna do 2 spoonsful of that. Maybe even 3, I might regret that, but so this is us pretending that we are these Italian Renaissance artists mixing our own paint. Oh, look at that. Be careful. I just dusted all of my thing with red paint dust. So I'm going, because I put too much in there, I'll blow on it. I think it's still just dust, but just be careful. I guess that's another reason to just mix it in small batches, which I get it, it's more work, but guys, they call it artwork. I don't know what else to say. And a lot of people assume that art is actually really, it's all easy and great. I mean, in a lot of ways it is, but it's a discipline. All right, so I think this is as mixed as it's going to get. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to paint my guy red. So you want to make sure there's 3, you leave 3, make sure there's 3 in between. That'll be orange and the 2 intermediates, yellow orange and red orange. Okay, and so with this one, red being such a strong color, it's also fairly opaque. It's not too transparent. So that's good. I am going to let that dry. I still have a decent amount of paint on my brush. And that's another big issue I feel like when students first start painting, because it's been my my experience that students don't have a lot of experience painting. Pay attention to how much paint you have on your brush. That makes a big difference. Dry. So I swept it on the bottom of my water, dried it off. Now I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to start with the tint. And I've got as decent of a chunk as I could of the white. And I'm going to mix that in, and it's going to make pink, also known as a tint of red. And I'm going to look at it, and it's not quite as white or as light as I would like it to be. I'm going to avoid mixing more of this into this color that I've mixed here. But before I go back into my white container, I have to rinse off my brush, dry it, and then I can go back for more white. And now it's, again, white is kind of, in terms of paint, it's a kind of a weak color and you need to use more of it. But black is exactly the opposite. You only need to use a tiny little bit. Oops. Do your best to paint in the lines, but and you're sweeping, you're not coloring. Don't be afraid to touch paint to paint. It really helps if the first one is dry, which you can, if you have, hair dryer might be a little bit too strong, but maybe on a low setting, that can help dry times quicken, so you're not sitting there waiting. Or you can have multiple things going on same time, so it's a little bit easier. Okay. And I just kind of go, personally, I go in rows to keep it as clean and even as I can get it, because that's what temper paints are a little bit more about. You blend a little bit more with acrylics and oil paint. With tempera, you work, it's more like a paint by number. You think of the shape, and it can be a layered paint by number, but you think of the shape, you put down the color, leave it. Later on, if you want to layer more on top after it's dry, you can. But you're not really creating a bunch of gradients or value transitions. I'm going to see if I can. Nope. Well, messed that up, but maybe I can get rid of it through layering. That's the brilliance of like acrylic. For you guys who are just starting out, this is fine. It's totally fine to work with. But with acrylic, it's much easier to paint over. And that's the magical thing about paint, is you don't have to erase anything. You just paint over it. Sometimes you might have to go the extra mile to quote unquote erase, but for the most part not. So one thing that I do need to tell you, and I'm being very careful right now, but you don't want to mix black and white with your color at the same time. And I've got way too much black here. I need more red to combat that. And the reason for that is that it makes it really chalky. Because it means you're mixing it with gray instead of with black or with white. So, and are there exceptions to that rule? Yes. But in our case, don't ever mix your color with gray. It's not going to get you the more pure kind of color result that you want. If it's in a different kind of, if you're working on a different painting and you're trying to go for some other specific kind of emotion, where having like a very gray, drab, chalky color story, that's different. But for this, don't do that, not yet. And I've used that kind of a color story in a painting I did. And then guess what? I redid that painting later on and didn't do that. So, because in truth, it worked better for the painting. But all right, and there we go. As you can tell, that is a little bit closer to what you want in terms of consistency with your shade. This is a little bit further off, but it's still drying, so I'm going to give that some more time to dry before I attempt giving it a second layer. I'm going to go, I still have some wet tint of my white. I'm going to see if I can hide this. Probably not, but figured I'd try. All right, so now clearly blue would be your third primary color, and usually I try and do all the primaries first, but for ease of what we're doing, and since you already have your colors mixed, we're going to go ahead and make our orange. So like I said, red is so strong. And yellow, like the white, is kind of weak. So, I'm drying my brush over here. You don't want a whole bunch of red. You want more yellow than red. And you want to make as much of the orange as you can, because if you can because you don't want to have to remix it to make your tint and your shade. And that's probably another part of painting that can be so difficult for students, is to learn how much color to make. Oh my gosh, look at that. And that was a whole lot of yellow in comparison to the amount of red we had on, but I think this is an orange. It's not a red orange. So we're going to go ahead and put it down in our orange section. Again, if you get out of the lines a little bit, it's not that big of a deal, because you can try and paint over that overage. Into this one, it would be a little bit harder, but with your new color, the tint of the orange will be harder to cover up this section. And yeah, I'm gonna need to do a second layer because it just doesn't look very even. That's okay. So now I'm going to bring a little bit over here, and we're going to turn that into the tint, and I'm going to bring a little bit over here, and we're going to turn that into the shade. And I'm going to, well, for the next one, I'm definitely going to need to make more white. I don't have enough white. So maybe, I'm not, this is good. This is a good little tint right here. I'm happy. And when I mix my color with my brush, it is really helpful. Like, usually best practice is to mix colors with a palette knife. You probably don't have a palette knife, and it's not going to work with a regular knife. So I twist my brush as I'm moving it in circles to truly mix the paint so it's all actually one color. Otherwise, you're going to get different values going on in. Okay, so I don't know where that cut off exactly, but I have my tint of orange, I have my orange, I washed my brush because I didn't want any of the white that was inside of my tint of orange to get into the shade that I'm about to create. So on my little palette right here, I have my little section of shade that I'm going to make. I just have that's actually probably too much black. I'm not even kidding. So I'm going to get rid of a little bit of that, because you can always add more. Yeah, you can barely tell that was once orange. And that was just the tiniest little fraction on my paintbrush. So I'm drying off my brush because I don't want to get too much water involved. And I'm going to add a little bit more orange, and that's closer to what I'm looking for. So again, you're using your critical thinking to assess how light, how dark. And then go ahead and paint. I'm going to paint over that line, and that's how you get that clean clean line. Yeah, these are almost like, this is almost like painting with watercolor. I'm not gonna lie to y'all. I've never used the powdered tempera. All right, and there, again, this also would benefit from having a second layer. So if you can make enough to create a second layer, that is ideal. Go slowly. And fill it in. You're coloring in the lines here. Again, sweeping in the lines. Because, and it's dry enough to where I think it's not gonna just push the wet paint around. No, it is. I'm gonna have to wait before I can really put much of anything else on there, and hopefully I have enough of my color to do a second layer that doesn't look too bad. I'm actually gonna go ahead and approach the green. I don't think I cleaned it off enough. So I'm gonna make a little bit more for my shade of yellow. Yes, you gotta wash your brush off each time before you dip it in a new color. I know, it's a pain in your butt, but you gotta do it. Cool. All right, let's see if, yes. You know what, it might not have enough water. And that's what I thought last time, and it kind of like ruined everything, but maybe another layer will help. And the reason you want to let it dry a little bit more is so you're not just pushing color like away as you're trying to thicken it on the first layer. I can't say that's officially what's happening here, but I do think it looks, in general, it looks better. I did not make enough, but in general, it looks better. So there are both artists and technicians out there in the world who literally all they do for their profession is mix color. So think about if that's how you made your living. How would you feel about that? They're like some of them who are super highly skilled at it. Yes, we also have machines that do it. Like if you need to match a color, like a wall color, that is done by a machine at the Home Depot. They usually, and it's kind of amazing, the machine usually only needs about a dime size of your color. Yeah. I mean, overall it looks better. Like right there, that spot, that was some that was still kind of wet and just got moved over, and it's kind of inconsistent. And I think I even had a tiny bit of black still in my brush, and that's what this is. And that's why when I mix my colors, I try and kind of spin the brush, and it's a mixture of spinning the brush and moving it in circles to try and avoid that. Granted, and there are some craftspeople and painters that apply something called one-stroke painting, and just look at how much more opaque, meaning non-see-through, that is. It's closer to this one. This one still needs to get there. So some of this, y'all are going to have to layer up. Sorry. You don't always have to do that, but in this case you do. So I'm going to go ahead and make the red orange. So I still have some of my orange, so what I'm going to do is have some of my red and then steal that orange over here. And that's going to hopefully, well, I'm going to need a little bit more of it. I was hoping to save some of it for my yellow orange. And you put it down and you assess, is that enough? And I'm going to tell you it's not different enough. It needs to be in between here and here. So I'm going to get out, hopefully I don't have to make any more yellow. We'll see. I'm going to get out some yellow because we need more yellow in that. Like it should be more red than orange. And that might be your back and forth. And at some point you're going to need to wash your palette, or maybe you have a couple different little lids that you can sift through. A piece of cardboard is also usually what I use with my students in class. You can use a piece of cardboard palette and then just throw it away or recycle it when you're done. That's a little closer. I think that's different enough from the orange, although I was able to buy everybody brushes. They're not the nicest. I think it's different enough. I might be changing my mind. I'm going to get a little more yellow. And this might be a back and forth for a while. Yeah, there we go. There we go. I'm actually way happier with that. But you legitimately might have like a bit of a back and forth. And I'm hoping I can save enough of this color, because remaking your color, it's a real challenge. Voila. I'm going to come over here. Here's a little free space. And I bet you I'm going to have to make more white. But I wanted to see if I could get away with not doing that just yet. And that's how Miss Thomas lives life on the edge. And y'all are like, lady, you're crazy. All right, so here is my, that doesn't look too different. That's a little concerning, but it'll be okay. This process might be kind of, painting in general is, I think, frustrating for a lot of students, because I'm just going to be very honest. Today, in our world, we do not use our hands quite enough. And in truth, it really scares me. I wonder how many professions we're shutting the door on for you guys by not making sure that you're playing with Play-Doh when you're really little, to really fine-tune those fine motor skills. We're not writing as much. And so those motor skills don't get developed. And I think that having control of the paint a little bit more difficult for students growing up today. But this is an opportunity to develop those, to think about how paint is mixed. I mean, this is how your clothes are made, how dyes are made. It's kind of crazy. Even if machines help with a lot of that, the initial color has to be constructed by a human. So I think that's a good introduction to what all this is, to thinking about quantity, practicing your critical assessment, because you're comparing color to color. Oh man, just the tiniest little bit, and it's probably gonna be too much, but that's okay. All right. There we go. It's maybe still a little too much for me. I'm happier with that. So I just turned my hue into my shade. And in truth, it might benefit me to use the smaller of my brushes. That's another hard one, and it's a hard one for me, even though I like consider myself to be a painter. This is my medium, not with tempera paint, but other forms of paint. Oh, I am using my tiny brush. Well, I'm going to see if my even tinier brush will work out, because these shapes are so small. You know what? Some of that might just be my brush is too dry. Look at that. Draggy. Weird. Now I've gotten it a little bit too watery, probably. Ugh, that's awful. Well, I'm going to have to wait for that. But another thing that's going to be probably kind of frustrating for a lot of you is mixing these colors, mixing the powder with the water. Just be patient with it. Make sure you're giving yourself enough time. If you're not giving yourself enough time, you're going to run into trouble. Just hands down. And I've left my white spoon in the water. I'm going to need to make sure it's pretty dry before I stick it back into that bag to get extra powder for my white paint. So I got to make sure that it is dry. I might need to get another paper towel in a minute because there's so much water in here. But one thing that's kind of cool, if you do a lot of paintings, which traditionally, especially if you're oil painting, you're always working on more than one painting at one time. I'm going to do two scoops of the white. Because remember, and I gave you guys more white paint than anything else because you typically need more white paint than anything else. But once your paper towel dries out, since you've mostly just been cleaning water off on it, you can use it again. So you're just trying to get that excess water off of your brush after you dry it off, or after you wash it. Oh no! There was a tiny bit of pink around here on my brush, and it contaminated my white ever so slightly. If that happens to you, make another white. Wash that out, make another one. Mine, it didn't do it. I caught it mostly in time. I might change my mind once I finish mixing it all the way, but I've definitely cleaned off my brush more. So pay attention to things like that. That would be another reason to pay attention to just how much paint you have on your brush. I think I'm okay. I think I caught it in time. It was just a very little bit of red. I don't think it'll affect my other colors too much. This is still pretty pure white. Well, that's a thing to be careful of. I'm going to get another one of these. Pretend I washed this off and dried it and then used it again. And this is for the last time I'm going to need yellow in this particular analogous group. Well, I'm probably going to need to remake that. Looks so bad. But yeah, these are not my favorite. The dry paints are not my favorites, but I do think it's kind of cool if we imagine that no, I need to make more yellow. We are Renaissance artists doing our thing. Drying my spoon off, because if it's wet, the powder is gonna stick to your spoon and get funky. All right, I'm gonna just a little. I'm only going to be doing this set of analogous colors today. I will finish things up later. So, I'm only going to do one little spoonful of yellow. And then the only color we'll need yellow for is to make green. And even this, you're not stabbing it. You shouldn't see your bristles going all over the place, because that's going to mess your brush up to the point of where you're sweeping. You're always sweeping. You want it to look more like all the bristles are following in the same direction. They're not going spread wide out. Okay. So we are going to make a yellow orange this time, so we're going to need a lot more yellow and only a tiny bit of red. And so another kind of fun thing, since you have multiple brushes, you can use both. Right? So hopefully I have more yellow than red here. And I do. I'm happy. I'm maybe not with the consistency of this, but I'm happy with the color of this, so we're going to try it. That'll be okay. Like, I usually use tempera paints with my intro students. Sorry guys, it's just not it. It's good for my budget, but they're pre-mixed. You don't have to mix them yourself, like you're an artist in the Renaissance period. But it's usually a better consistency. And I'll show you what the difference is here in a minute. All right, so I'm going to take just a little bit over here, and we're going to go ahead and first do the tint. Remember, a lot of white, a little bit of the color. And it's just so transparent. Sorry, it's really not supposed to be this transparent. But color's good. And now I'm going to go ahead and make a shade. Woo, there's a lot of red still in this brush. I'm going to go back. I'm going to really dry it off a little bit better. And then once you don't see the red marks coming in, then it's good. And I'm going to do a tiny, oh, that's maybe even, I'm going to clean my black off over here a little bit first. And then I'm going to go, there we go. And the thing about a plastic lid is none of it, you're going to get to use all of your paint. If you're working on a piece of cardboard, it's going to absorb a lot of your paint, and you're going to probably have to mix more color. It's also going to kind of, you're not maybe going to get as good of a read on what your color is, because it's on brown, probably a brown. Sometimes there's white cardboard and not a white surface, so it's just easier to see the color this way too. And again, this transparency is insane. Hopefully, if I was using this particular powdered paint in my class and y'all were in my class physically, we would be doing some I would be getting out the heat guns so y'all could dry stuff off a bit faster and layer, because this is a little crazy just how transparent this is. So I'm really sorry if you're unhappy with the results of that. Know that there are limitations to this particular brand of paint or kind of paint. So now I have my analogous warm colors over here. I am just to show you the difference in the opacities. Look at how much more opaque this brand of paint is in comparison to this one. But it's what we have right now. I don't know if you can really see those differences, but I know I can. So once you get going, I will do the rest, but some of you might not need to see the rest. You know that blue will go here, green will go here, purple or violet will go here, and then those intermediates, this will be red, violet, because red, it's in between red and violet. This will be blue violet because it's in between blue and violet. This will be blue green because it's in between green and blue. And this will be yellow green because it's in between yellow and green. It's pretty logical. Feel free to paint the background, make this look like a finished artwork, make it look cool, make it look interesting to you. I know the paint's maybe a bit frustrating. Maybe you are blessed enough to have a different set of paints at home that you would rather use. I definitely encourage that. But voila, this is what we're here to do, is to explore the wonderful world of mixing colors.